Welcome to the Everyday Magic Podcast.
I'm Dr. Sophia Trivena.
And I'm Anya Rock. We've been best friends for 25 years, living very different lives and always connected by the idea that no matter what life throws at us, we can find the magic.
Today's episode, we're going to explore the magic that's found in the intersection of sex and intuition. So as best friends, co-creating a company together and living life together, of course, we talk about many things, but somehow every conversation leads to love, romance, intimacy, and sex. And you might have seen in a previous episode that we really, really believe that when you're in partnership with someone else, sex is one of the most important reasons to be together.
Truly. And having lived in a marriage for so long where it wasn't prioritized, it wasn't essential, and really at no fault of my partner, I began my own healing process and had to confront some of the ways that I had disconnected from my sexuality, disconnected from that, what I now know to be my creative fire, my creative resource. And I had told myself a story. It didn't matter anymore, was really not a part of my life for a decade.
Wow. I can't imagine being friends with you in our 20s where sex was a big part of our decade. It's amazing that you had that. And I just want to share, and I don't think I have shared with you, but I'm just finishing my book, The Divine Feminine and Intimacy, and I've done tons of research, and 40 to 55% of marriages in America are sexless. And there's a pandemic of it because people prioritize work. So there's that very simple thing of everyone is overworked, overstressed, everyone's living beyond their means. So that just like squeezes out the sexual energy. Then we have everyone focused on the real masculine of doing, performing, being perfect, having a certain appearance in other people's eyes, all which take people out of the body. And they're not connected with the energy that's flowing through them. The sexual energy is like a natural wellspring, nourishing resource of vitality that if you're not letting it flow, it dries up. And often you get so busy, with work, finishing school, it dries up and it's really hard to get it back. So just so you're not alone.
Yeah. No, I thank you. And I realize that it is an epidemic and it's also a symptom of women putting themselves last on the list, literally. My sexuality, my desire, my connection with my own creative sexual energy will come after the to-do list.
The to-do list is the sex killer. Yeah.
And, we were at a TED Talk and we heard a really wonderful TED Talk about putting creativity first. You could really almost swap out, put sex first.
They are the same thing.
Yeah.
I remember dating a writer and us saying that when he was writing, he would need to take a break from being intimate. And then when he finished writing, that's when he could be sexual. He's like, they come from the same place. He would feel that. And I mean, if you get into the chakras, the second chakra is the relational, the sexual, and the creativity. It's the womb space where the energy flows and wants to go somewhere and be creative. Yeah. So why don't we go back to describing our sexual history and journeys a little bit? And we've always shared a belief that it's important and it should be at the forefront, even if it disappeared in your marriage. And I've had years where it disappeared for me too, for different reasons. But why don't we just talk through our journeys a little bit?
Okay. Who first?
Oh, the ones that are not talking.
Well,
I had a feeling it was you.
Yeah. I think I just shared a little of being married, right? And so before that, do you want to go all the way back? How far are we going back here?
I think it's interesting to know where our framing came from. And I don't mind going first. It's like when I was younger, I knew that I wanted a certain connection. I always had a sense that sex could be way more than just the physical. And I don't know where it came from, but I really felt like we needed to look in each other's eyes. I remember my earliest fantasies as a girl was that I'd be lying with a boy in the grass and we'd be staring in each other's eyes. And I don't even know what our bodies were doing, but I was just so locked into his eyes and him being so close to me in nature with the sunshine on us. And that's where the arousal came, and that's when my first self-pleasuring came. So I feel like my very first experiences were what people would now call tantra or whatever. But I don't think that the culture that named Tantra owns that energy. I think that was the framework they put over a natural energy we all have access to, that I was already connected to in my fantasy world before I even liked boys or anything. And then I remember when I started to have boys interested in me, I was like, are you going to look in my eyes? Are we going to like, right? What are you feeling?
They definitely weren't looking at your eyes. You were like, chin up.
Yeah, it was kind of like that. Yeah. So I really had to be friends with boys first in high school, and they had to really be my friend and like me and actually do nice things with me and think about me, remember the things I talked about. Like I really cared that they cared about me and kept their eyes up here as much as possible.
I love that. That's beautiful. And actually that's really interesting to know now, because that is a little bit of the journey you've been on. Of like, maybe we're friends first and then a lovership, and that blooms into something deeper.
Right. I wanted to have a certain feeling before I had sex with someone, that we had that and we had a strong foundation of that, and then it would turn into sex and no one could really do it. And so I was 20 before I had sex. And I only had sex when I was 20 because I was like getting halfway through university and I'm like, I cannot be a graduating virgin. This is getting ridiculous. And I actually chose to have sex with someone who I wasn't in love with, that wouldn't mean anything, because I'd been waiting for meaning for so long that I thought I would do the opposite. I'd be like, it's like, I don't really care about them. We have been together for a few months, but they have not nearly shown me the caring other boyfriends have, nor do we have the connection, but that's good because then I won't fall in love with them.
How'd that go for you?
Have you ever seen like any of those old films where someone's in a barrel going over like a waterfall and then it smashes into like lots of jagged rocks and like someone comes out like hurt in every way possible?
That was you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
awesome.
It was horrible. I did not realize that when I opened that doorway to having sex, whether I decided it wasn't going to have meaning and that it would be the sexual experience I need, but wrote me into the wrong thing. I think it was 4 or 5 years before I finally got over that person. Yeah.
Very interesting.
Train wreck. You didn't even know any of this, did you?
No,
I know.
So good.
Because then fast forward to like 2 years after that, I meet you. And I had a very short marriage between me getting over that guy and then short marriage at like mid-20s, totally sexless, like could not feel arousal in that relationship. And I remember riding my bicycle in the park that we were friends in, and I seen our yoga teacher, and he told me, oh my God, you're so vibrant and lit up. Are you pregnant? Because I was married. And I said, no, I got divorced. And I remember wearing like a white sort of see-through dress with pink underwear that I knew you could see through the dress. And I'm like, I'm ready to be sexual again. I was like, I want to. And I remember crying with my husband going like, I'm never going to kiss another boy ever. And he's like, I don't know that you're ready for this. And I'm like, you might be right. And I wasn't. I had a lot more exploring to do. Enter you into my life.
Yes.
We had a lot of fun. A lot of play, a lot of sexcapades. We had a solid group of women that were all very sex forward, very not constricted by, no one had religion. Not one of us had a religious framing. Everyone was pretty sexually liberated.
Yeah, we had a lot of fun.
Okay. Tell me your story.
Well, mine actually, so very different, because I was very young when I had sex for the first time. I was sexually abused at 9. And so what I now know is that desire and intimacy and shame were really tightly woven together for me. And so in my life, I was 9, and then I actually lived with that family. So it went on for a while. And then afterward, I sort of claimed, like I've learned since, again, that like when we experience trauma, we kind of go down 2 different ways. We can kind of go with the like bad girl, like everything's fine, or some people go with like, I'm never doing that again. You know, they take the shame and kind of get smaller. Others get more defensive. So I went with the bad girl, everything's fine. Like,
okay, describe this bad, you're saying that as if it's common knowledge, you know, the bad girl and everything fine path. What does that mean?
And I see it now as a defense, but I literally was sort of like, the feeling that I had and I was only in 5th grade, was that like, I'm an adult now. I've got this. I can do, I've experienced something adult, And that makes me an adult.
No way.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay.
And so we moved a lot back and forth from Ottawa to Toronto. And I changed my name around that time. I was Annie, and I decided I wanted to be Anya.
Of course you did. And you moved away from that person who,
Yes.
right?
Yeah.
But when you're still young, but you've had this experience, when you met other boys, guys, did you feel like you wanted to have that experience with them?
Right. So I'm thinking now, like fast forward to high school, it's a little like people talk about having your first kiss, and I'm like, I don't know. Yeah, whatever.
I don't remember before that. Yeah.
Yeah, it's just sort of like all the firsts are gone.
Right.
There's no like first kiss. There's no first base. Like,
right.
We've done that already.
Right. My first kiss was grade 7 at the roller skating rink. Yeah. Right.
Yeah.
Right. But you didn't get that.
I did still have like crushes on boys. I remember being a bit of a wallflower at a dance and like.
Cannot imagine that.
Totally.
Annie,
I know.
Annie was a wallflower at the dance.
And I had a huge crush on a boy. It was like my friend's brother. And I was like, like I still went down the road of like having huge crushes, but I think it was the grappling between the two things. I'm this little girl, but I have this like adult experience. So fast forward, I think most of my sexual experiences were like I drank a lot, did, some experimenting with drugs. Like there was not a lot of presence. There was no real like gaze into my eyes. And
you weren't looking for the boy that was really nice to you that would gaze into your eyes that could maybe be your small town husband fast. No. Okay. I wanted boys to open the door for me, close the door behind me, tell me I look pretty, take me on dates.
I was kind of like into the bad boys. Treat me badly, right? Breadcrumby.
And have hot sex.
Yeah, so I did that for a long time. And then, in fact, I think that was sort of like when I met my husband, we had a great intimate relationship, we had great sex in the beginning, but there was a bit of him being the good guy who was different. He was not the bad guy. He was not what I was used to.
Mm-hmm. I remember all this. I remember all of this. I was there from the...
Yeah, there was some conscious, like, I'm going to choose differently.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And then pretty quickly, it's so interesting to have the conversation now, knowing what I do about the healing process, knowing and understanding from all the somatic training I've done of how we literally have like a break energetically between our sexuality and our heart. So we associate like love and sex differently when we've had experiences like that. It's
like abusive experiences. Yeah.
It's why often people have affairs or, right, they can have a sexual relationship and not a love relationship, and they need to be separate. There's a hard split between the two.
Yep. And
through healing, we can often get back to like integration of the two.
Right.
And our society is filled with, right, people who have that hard split. And I had that hard split. And spent a lot of my marriage just because we were supposed to, and a certain number of times a week or month. And then we were having kids, and then you have babies, and you're like, okay, that's the last thing I want.
Yeah.
I remember being at a point of like, I want no one to touch me because you have babies and breastfeeding and going into mothering. And there's a point in marriage and there's a point with small children where you're just really in it. You're not sleeping. Somebody always needs something.
I can't.
People are literally, sustaining life from your body.
Yeah.
And it can be kind of hard to find your way out of that season.
Right.
Back to each other.
Totally. I've worked with so many people that almost everyone has that. Yeah. And it's interesting. I've met a few couples and worked with a few couples that did the opposite. While she was breastfeeding, he would come behind her and enter her from behind. And they made it a part of their union that they were not meant to be so separate. And that couple was hot for each other for decades. They just, they didn't make that big separation.
You see my mind get blown there?
Yeah, that's why I'm mentioning it. Like, what blows your mind on that? You can't imagine breastfeeding while someone's entering you from behind.
Yeah, totally, like two separate worlds.
Right?
Yeah.
And a number of people have made them the same world.
Fascinating.
Yeah. That she's a goddess, and in that moment, the baby's experiencing the love field.
Yeah, it was not my experience.
Not most experiences. Yeah. Not most experiences.
Yeah. Yeah. So then, come to a more recent chapter where I've left So I stopped drinking, I started microdosing, did a lot of this healing work.
A lot of therapy.
A lot of therapy, and a lot of specifically somatic therapy, plant medicine. And
somatic therapy is?
Somatic therapy is body-based. So really understanding the body keeps score. We hold trauma in our body. And somatic is literally of the body. And it's one of the things, my intuition comes from my body now. I really listen.
Right. And your sexual energy comes from the body. And that's where I find intuition and sex go together.
Yep.
Is that it's a flowing energy field that has actual nourishment and information.
Mm-hmm. And I mean, we've talked about, going to my very first sex party and waiting for
talked about it. I went with you.
Yes. No, I know. We talked about it. I guess we haven't talked about it here yet.
Right.
But I did go to my very first sex party, and a sober, conscious container with consent. And I gave myself permission to be just a spectator. But what I was waiting for was the hell yes. And understanding, I think also as someone who's had sexual trauma, is what does that lit up feeling feel like? Of it's an absolute yes, that body energy, that sexual energy, not oh, okay, that sounds good. Oh, sure, let's try. But the real hell yes.
And I will say from my own experience and research and work with a lot of people is that hell yes often is, I want to recreate the trauma. The hell yes. That's the thing, is that a lot of people are I can't trust my body because it keeps leading me to the chocolate cake, which I really, really want. And it's really, really good, but I feel really, really sick after. And then when I go to the nourishing salad, it's boring, bland. I can't get into it. And so it's healing the ability to have your sexual urges being aligned with what actually fulfills you on other levels, I feel is a similar journey to tapping into your intuitive wisdom that's been overrun by the mind. It's both of these things have been distorted into places by 12,000 years of training from patriarchy, first of all. 12,000 years of patriarchy has trained women to be aroused by imprisonment and pain. That's how they survived. And so when there's a man that's going to keep them or dominate them, that used to be a sign of, I will have you in my home and you won't die outside of the patriarchal norms. And so now we have to override 12,000 years. And then we also have to override our abuse that told us love comes from an inconsistent source. Love comes from a source that hits me sometimes or it sexually abuses me. So then there's that we have to get through. Or then there's what TV's shown you, media showed you, and couples that you rate. So there's so many things in your field, literally creating your hardwiring of what arouses you. And it's, people think, oh, if it arouses me, then that is the thing I should follow. That's, my body's telling me I can trust that. And unfortunately, your body also says that cake is good, eat it. If you don't have a mental overlay that says, actually that's a treat. But on the other side of that, when you clear all of that out, as you found, you have access to something that's a clear signal, a true full yes. And I just want to emphasize that I feel what you were going to at that sex party is you're I've gotten rid of the unhealthy things. I've done the healing. I don't know what lights up my system without all of that.
In this new operating system. Right.
Yeah.
And we talk about some things that light up your circuitry.
Yeah.
Right. To know. And I think it's so nuanced. There's so many shoulds and don'ts and so many people at different parts of the journey. And there just needs to be more permission to explore and to, understand ourselves and be willing to, even if you're well, that does light me up and I want to explore it.
I want to eat the cake.
Right.
And I actually am a big believer, eat the cake. Let your system eat the cake, but do it consciously.
Right.
Go and do that. I've said that to you. So we're sitting at the swimming pool and that hot Aussie, and I'm he's lighting up my circuitry and is all kinds of trouble. And he dropped me off at his house. I was I have to go
call
follow
me
it.
in the morning.
Because if I'm drawn, I need to go find out and play it out consciously, even if it's not a good experience, so that my system registers that draw as a not good experience, as long as you're not in danger, of course. And we both knew I wasn't. But I knew that I wasn't going to get the emotional fulfillment.
Right.
I knew he didn't want to have the relationship that I want to have. He wasn't going to gaze into my eyes, although he did the entire time.
He wasn't going to open any doors for you the next day. And
that's true.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
he might have gazed into your eyes in the moment.
He did.
Yeah. He was a lover.
He was a lover. Right. But
Strictly.
he was a lover. Like, I want more than a lover.
Mm-hmm.
And I knew he was going to be just a lover. And I knew I wasn't going to get all these other levels satisfied. And I was still so drawn to him that I needed to go have the experience. It's almost like I need to eat that cake and get sick, so I don't want cake anymore.
Mm-hmm.
That's my way. I don't know that it's a good way or the best way, but ever since I did have that experience with him, I see him all the time, and I've never been drawn again. My system remembers, you're going to get something, but not enough.
Right. And I think even just full permission to explore the lovers, right? To take away any idea or stigma of like, I mean, certainly in this season of life,
yes,
right, with eyes wide open and bringing my full consciousness of knowing, and also then knowing when someone's meant to stay a lover and not be anything else.
I think any season of life, like hookup culture starting in middle school now. I mean, and I am all for free sex, and I am all for exploring where you're drawn. The thing that's missing from that culture in a lot of ways is the focus on my experience of the pleasure. It's more so like, did I do the right thing, or did I perform the right way, or did he get off, or did she get off? Are they going to talk well about me to their friends, right?
Right. I don't think hookup culture and having a lover are the same thing at all.
Right. They can be, though. Okay, well, let's differentiate that. Let's call hookup culture.
Right.
When you're doing what you're supposed to be doing to have experiences that don't
feel fulfilling.
That don't feel fulfilling.
I mean, I think the hookup culture, maybe it's a blanket statement, but I don't think there's a lot of fulfillment.
So I actually have done the research on this. Like 95% of...
Pretty much always.
Always. I'll give you the stats on the latest stats on this. 95% of women and 90% of men say they regret hooking up. They feel bad about themselves, and they lose respect for themselves and the other person.
Mm-hmm.
And most people say that they do it because they don't want to be left behind in experiences, and that they don't know how to have other experiences. So if we want to say the hookup culture is that, which it pretty much is, and if we want to say loverships, lover is to explore a dimension of pleasure that person can give you uniquely, but can't give you everything.
Right.
So, which I had with that man that night.
Yeah.
But I didn't get the other dimensions that I want. So I think exploring lovers is a big part of intuition.
Mm-hmm.
Like, they're on your path and you're drawn to them to either heal something inside of you, explore a dimension you haven't got to explore, which means expressing and receiving pleasure in a way that you maybe haven't. Mm-hmm. And there might be a time where you want to have a whole bunch of lovers, which is different than hookup culture, I think.
I do too.
Yeah.
I think we can hold it differently for sure.
Yeah. How would you hold it differently?
Well, I would hold it differently now to just on the journey I've been on and continue to go on of learning. And I've learned so much through you about like what's possible in creating a container of a lovership.
Oh, it's everything, the agreements and keeping them.
And having
lovership is about agreements and keeping them.
Yep. And having a sacred container.
Yeah. Let's talk about that.
Yeah. It's interesting. Like once you've said it, it's like you can't unknow it, right? It's like you watch people kind of go unconsciously into this. It's like you said about the first hookup, like, or the first time you had sex, like, I don't care about him, so it'll be fine. And it went terribly.
Yeah. Everyone's like, we don't need to talk about it. We're just going with it.
There
it's
were
fine.
no agreements.
Yeah. There's no agreements. And it's like, if you can't sit and talk to someone about these agreements, then you're not setting up a safe space. It's like, okay, we should talk about what these agreements are. Like, my agreements, vary in different circumstances, but like the last time I was at a hotel, I met someone who was from Greece that was leaving to Greece the next day. We were never going to see each other again. Are very different agreements than the guy that I saw at the pool that I'm going to see there all the time, right? It's very different. And so those agreements are, for me, intimacy has to go really, really slow. There has to be complete mastery of the entry over a long time. We need to hang out. We need to have dinner and get to know each other a little bit. And once, I'm fully open and fully available to, having you all the way inside me, only then can you start to have your own experience of exploration that I can move with you. So it's like the beginning is sort of like me leading the way. And after that, you can lead the way, and then we can then I want to co-create from there. I want to go to a place where we're moving together. And I've said these things.
Yeah.
Right.
I think that's a huge difference. I think 99% of people aren't having those conversations.
I would say so. I think so.
Right.
And it's interesting because when I tell women this, they're like, "Man, guys don't want to do that." And I'm like, then they don't get to have sex with me. And they're like, and I'm like, and it's okay for a guy to not want to have sex with you.
Mm-hmm.
Your only value that patriarchy also programmed into you is that you're willing to be chosen by a man,
mm-hmm.
because women's survival depended on being chosen by a man.
Mm-hmm.
And if they didn't get chosen by a man, they could die. There was no economic or any sort of support for them. And so you don't need to be chosen by a man anymore. And you get to choose, and you get to choose together, and you get to choose whether you want the same experience. And I've laid out what I need from men, and they've said no. And I've laid out what I need from men, and they've said, that sounds incredible. Let me give that a try. Like this guy was like, that's not my way, but let me try. And I'm like, if it's not fun for you and it's not enjoyable, we can just stop. And the whole time I was like, so this is different, right? And he's like, so different. And I'm like, and he's like, it's amazing. And I was like, do you want to keep going at this pace? He's like, totally. And I've gotten in there with someone else before to that place, and they've been like, it's okay, it's not bad. And I was like, is it something you just sort of endure? And he's like, for now. And then afterwards it was, and interestingly, not one man I've introduced this way of beginning sex has ever looked back and they've said every single time it's better. Every single one of them has said that was way better. I had never knew that that's what it takes to like open a woman or whatever. And if you think in ancient times, it was older women that initiated younger men. Say it.
You're like, great, permission granted.
Are you talking about me?
Will you be initiating the young men of today?
Oh, God. What if that was a job? What if someone literally had a job of initiating men into the world of like pleasurable sex for women? Why isn't that a job?
That's the new earth.
I don't know that I want that job. My North Star is always a partnership. But my God, I've done it and no one's paid me. I think there's probably 100 men that could say I changed their world of sex because of what I shared and taught them from what's natural for me. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I remember one man I introduced it to, at the beginning, they're all confused and whatever. But after he was with another woman, his next girlfriend, and he's like, it's like she has this juvenile way of making, of sex. And I was like, what is it? He's like, she just wants to get to orgasm. And I'm like a guy? And I said, do you remember when we first got together? That's what you wanted to do, and I had to slow you down and teach you? Like, do you remember I taught you this? He's like, right. And I said, you can invite her. I don't want to be a teacher, but I invited you into a new way you can invite her. And he's like, what do I say? What do I do? My friend was like, you're coaching your ex-boyfriend and having sex with his new girlfriend. They're like, why is no one paying me for this? But it worked, and they found their way. And and I remember, so I traveled 25 countries, and I was often not in the same place. So I had a lot of experiences, and they were all led by intuition. Let me back up a minute. When I got divorced 8 years ago, the first time I self-pleasured after the divorce, I wanted to not think about him. And I don't watch TV or anything, so I didn't have anyone else to think about. There was no one in my field that was hot or interesting. So I was like, I'm just going to open myself up to see what happens. And when I did, I had a very specific fantasy that was really arousing of me being in a hotel that was shaped a very different way with a balcony off the side instead of the front. It was really weird. And on the outside of the balcony, there was a jungle. And I went out and I was looking into the jungle, and a man came up behind me and started making love to me. Fast forward like a week, I'm in a coffee shop on the other side of the island in Hawaii. And I talked to this guy for 3 hours while we're working. And he's like, do you want to go to a hotel and have sex? And I'm just freshly divorced, much like you. And I'm like,
you're like, yes.
And I was like, that's actually a great idea. I would love to do that. So he takes me to the hotel, and the hotel room is exactly what I saw in my vision with this balcony and the weird thing. I go, I wonder if the jungle's out there. I walk out, I'm looking at the jungle's there. He comes up behind me. We start having sex. And I'm like, this is exactly the fantasy I had. And from then on, every time I self-pleasure, I open myself and I don't think about it. And someone comes and they're like this big person, or they're this smaller guy, or this guy that's bald, or this guy with hair. And it's the next person I'm with. The energy is coming already and preparing me to be with that person. And when I'm with them, it's like when you're with a lover 3 or 4 times, you're more familiar with how it's going to go. I have that the first time because I've already been with them.
That's pretty amazing.
So the intuitive space and the sexual space want to be the same space, and I think people are not accessing both of them. They're shutting them out with porn. The ideas they have, the mind is shutting out those channels that actually have something to receive, and those channels are getting filled with what you saw on TV or the last person you were with or what you thought when you were little or So I think that's where for me intuition.
So is self-pleasure the key to intuition?
Yes. Yes. You heard it here. Everyone get in there.
Right.
And open yourself to being shown what's possible. It's your space. There's no one else there.
Well, being in a pleasure coaching container at the moment.
Preach.
Yes.
Preach.
It really truly is like our turn on, right? That sexual energy, letting, as my mentor said, like letting pussy guide us into like, what do we want to create? What do we want to, who is the partner or the lover? Imagine you're just like, I want to create more abundance. I want to make more money next year. We can have that same conversation in 2 ways. One turned on and one not turned on. Guess which one creates more magnetic energy? The turned on version.
I know. Yeah.
And the self-pleasure in particular conversation as a mom of a young girl, this is our space. This is our body. This is our opportunity to understand like what does turn me on. As again, my mentor said, like before we hand the keys to someone else, like we have to learn to drive our own car.
And it does open the intuition. It does open the manifestation. I don't love the word manifestation, but I would say our creator energy.
Yeah.
It's our creator energy. It's the womb space that actually is so connected to cosmic energy and the flow of all life. It's where life comes from. If you can have life come into that space.
And in all cultures, goddess, matriarch cultures before patriarchy,
yes,
the female was revered because she brings life.
Absolutely. And it was, calling the uterus, which had a word that was like hysta or something in Greek, that it was like, oh, you have hysteria and you have to get a hysterectomy because that's such a bad thing. It's making you crazy. So it's like turning women against their own womb intelligence. Right. And it's just like, if we can come back to our own sacred space where we actually let our hands wander over our own bodies, listening to the music we want, experiencing what we feel like to ourselves, and then let what happens happen, like not have a directedness to it, not latch on to some sort of manufactured fantasy outside of you in media or couples around you, but actually like your own body's wisdom. You can feel your future lover.
And you can tap into a receptivity that's so foreign to most women.
Totally.
There is some of the women I work with, we do the simplest thing, like just touching softly, right? And being in a softness and a receiving, not in relation to another person, but in relation to ourselves, and unlocking those codes of the feminine as a way to know ourselves better, but also to like step out of doing and back into being.
Right. And that's also out of the 12,000 years of programming. And it's also the sexual trauma. Like you actually get
so multi-layered.
So multi-layered. And you get to access that circuitry that is your pure, innocent state. That's all yours, that no one else needs to know about, feel, understand. It's for you to understand you. And when I do that, the circuitry that lights up for the wrong thing starts to weaken. It's like I'm making this system stronger, this natural system stronger, and that bad boy stuff, that other thing it's not as interesting because he's not tempting me to go and sleep with him because I can go home and self-pleasure and it's going to be so good. And then when I meet that person, I'm going to get to have that actual experience and I'll be able to recognize them better. So for me, the intuition and sex are super, super entwined. And then the cool thing is that when you actually meet that person, you already have this familiarity and you have a knowing of each other. And it's never right away, but usually within 3 to 5 times of us being together, we have like a 5-hour journey.
A
And
5-hour journey.
these 5-hour journeys, I think, are very, very, very powerful in that no one has an agenda. No one has a goal. We just feel the energy moving us. And when you let the energy move you the way that you let it move you in self-pleasuring and show you, it becomes an energy source rather than an energy drain. When people are like, I'm too tired to have sex, I'm like, I'm so tired, I need to have sex so I get energy. Like imagine sex gave you energy rather than taking energy. And so we could both be tired and let's lie there and look in each other's eyes and just like, and then one hand lifts and you touch the other person, then the other hand lifts, and then all of a sudden your hand's moving on its own. Then all of a sudden you're sort of, you know how we were tired when we saw each other. We've been talking for hours now because we see each other and we get lit up. Imagine the sexual energy is like lighting you up and leading you. And when it's leading you and it has its own source and you're just following and it's so pleasurable and so entwining and you never know what the next thing's going to be and you're surprised every time. And it's just like a beautiful adventure you don't want to have end. And I never set out to have 5-hour sex. But boy, it happens pretty much every time with someone when we are surrendered into that space and not doing it from archaic circuitry or abuse circuitry or performance circuitry.
And I remember I think it was, right? I was married and we had that conversation. I was like, 5-hour sex? Like, who would want that?
Yeah. I remember being at the gym and there was these 2 30-year-old guys and I said something like, I'm in this amazing relationship. I thought they were gay, so I don't know if I would have talked about it to this extent. Because I was kind of saying like, you guys probably do, like, and they were like, well, you know what? One of them said, what makes great sex? And I said, we have our 5-hour sessions. And they both touched shoulders and slid down and sat down. And they're like, what do you mean 5-hour sex? I'm like, do you want me to really tell you? And I'm like, are you two together? They're like, no, we're heterosexual. We have girlfriends. Like, we like girls. And I said, okay, do you really want me to tell you? And I held court in the gym. And I was like, so you're with a woman and you both like slowly like find the best playlist, like music that you both really like and let it be on like long, and then slowly undress each other while you're looking at each other, but feel each other's energy. And like literally like when you're touching her shoulder, be so fascinated by this inch of her shoulder as you take her bra strap off. And like I talked them through it and I'm like, and then
they're both like
they could not move. They were just like, this is the most fascinating thing they've ever experienced. And I described this to a number of people and I was like, be fascinated by the thing that's happening right now. Be enthralled at what it feels like, what you feel in your body. So present. Like feel your fingertip, feel what your finger feels like against them. And just be so absorbed in it and don't even think about anything else existing until something else pulls you. And all of a sudden, like, you know, her cheek is fascinating. And now this is fascinating. And just let that wandering keep happening and you'll both be doing it. And all of a sudden you'll be in positions you've never even seen before. Or you'll be doing something for like that you think you want to never end, but all of a sudden something else will be happening. It's just like this ride that takes you in places you could never imagine. And they came back and they were like, you've changed our lives. Like our girlfriends are so happy. I did it I told a younger woman too, and she went back and she said, I got my boyfriend into, she called it slow sex. I don't know if that's a thing, but she's like, I talked to him about the slow sex you talked about. She's like, it's changed everything. I think people just don't know it's possible.
Presence.
Yeah. Pure presence, music, no agenda, no outcome. And then for me, I like to have like a journey like that once on the weekend and once on the weekday, like twice a week is my favorite. That's a good regular. It's like you go to the gym every day and people have a sense of it. They're like, if I'm at the gym for 20 minutes, it's not enough. I'm like, if I'm doing sex for 20 minutes, it's not enough.
I watched a couple talk about like even when they're having 20-minute quickie though, they sort of stop, they pause, and they start the sacred container.
Yes.
And I thought that was really beautiful, right? No matter what, even if it is a quickie, that we always have an opportunity to make it sacred.
Yes. And I used to set an alarm. So when not the 2-month boyfriend, but the boyfriend before that, which was a 6-month journey, we would have 9 minutes. I'm like, we have 9 minutes before we have to go. I'm like, set the alarm. And those 9 minutes would be magical. But we'd have no agenda. The no agenda is the biggest part. I'm like 9 minutes to even just sit here and touch each other. We'd always start with looking in each other's eyes and just letting our hands move where they want to with clothes on. Somehow we'd be naked having sex in 9 minutes, but we never expected it. We just be like, we have 9 minutes to kill. I'm like, do you want to have sex? And you're like, sure. But we didn't feel it. It wasn't like there was arousal and we couldn't keep our hands off each other. But when we opened the container for it, I would be like, how does 9 minutes get that much done?
And do you think he was as connected to his intuition? Or do you think that?
Very much so. He's a very intuitive person, yeah. Why do you ask that?
I just wonder if that experience also helped him be more connected to, I mean, I know the experience of being with you.
Yeah. He would say things like, while we were
intuition.
having sex, he's like, I would feel us in a big, beautiful house. And I was feeling this future possibility for us, that we could have a big, beautiful house and that it was on the ocean. And I stayed with it. And I was seeing that you had like paintings up all over the walls. Like he would start to have visuals and things. We actually, in that relationship, we would feel those things. And I'd say, let's keep with it and orgasm with it and use our sexual creator energy to create that and to bring it. So I feel like we haven't even as humans tapped into what that orgasmic creative sexual energy can do if we actually allow it to enter, allow it to bring in a future possibility, and then use our will to align ourselves to that possibility and keep our will and what's been presented to us alive in orgasm. I believe that's a creator life force that makes it happen, makes it real.
Beautiful.
Yeah. So what would you say to people as the big takeaways that you've, that you would take around sex and intuition?
I think explore both freely. Trust, right? I saw a shirt the other day that God loves sluts. I was like, yeah, like let's just take away all the taboo, all the ideas of right or wrong, right?
It's all patriarchy, by the way.
Yeah,
there was no ownership. There was no marriage and sex go together until women were property. And in hunter-gatherer society, women nor land were property. And so sexual reproduction was just part of the communal experience, and taking care of children were communal. Once they started to have agriculture, women could have more children and got bound to them and were in homes and invisible, so their domestic work became less valued because they were hidden, only because they had more children to take care of. But before, the whole village took care of all the children. And men started to own the land because they were out front being seen and on the land. And then all of a sudden, to pass on the land, they needed to make sure their son was going to inherit it. So they needed to have a woman as property to give them the son and to be owned, right? So like all of that is patriarchy. That sex belongs in marriage is 100% patriarchy, no matter how you look at it in every way. That sex can be more sacred than people hold it. Absolutely. Does it have to be within the confines of marriage or even a relationship? No, it should be it's sacred when both people agree and keep the agreements, whatever those agreements may be. That's the only real place of a varying degree of nourishment or health of sex, is how much have you made agreements and you're both keeping them. Right. But they're not, the agreements do not come from marriage or society or your last experience or your friend or porn. They come from what are your desires? Right.
A key question. And being willing to be in the emptiness, in the space long enough to figure out what you desire. It's big, right? And to explore and to let go of the rights and wrongs and just know you get to have your flavor in the way you want it. And in the same way that your intuition is going to come uniquely as yours, so can your desires.
The same in a lot of ways. Your intuition can give you possibilities beyond what you know. That's why we rely on it in business and in our lives. Like my rational mind sees these three choices, which one's most expansive? Would you say that since we depend on expansiveness so much for what is an intuitive truth to follow, would you say that we could also use that with who our sexual partners or the type of sexual experience we want to have?
Whether it's expansive? Yes, I think so.
Yeah.
Right.
Like I could say it feels really expansive to have some sort of hot one night when I'm in Paris that weekend. I want to call that in. And it does feel expansive. But it doesn't feel so in LA for some reason. Like that can all be real and true. That's beyond the rational mind.
When are we going to Paris?
Yeah. And if we go together, are we going to have sex?
If we're getting 2 rooms.
2 rooms. Yeah. No going to Paris and sharing a room with your friend. Yeah.
There's always logistics behind the expansive, intuitive hit.
The agreements are. I remember the sex party that one guy was like, "Can I be with the two of you together?"
Oh, yeah. We were like, we have to have coffee tomorrow and hang
We
out.
have to work together tomorrow. And I was like, I don't know that I really need to experience that. But if you want to have sex with one of us and then the other one, I could do that if we both wanted to. And then it was like, do we both want to? And we're like, yeah, we don't really feel like it. But it was interesting to try on a scenario of would we want to, would we not want to. I really did feel that if you were with someone intimately and I was with someone intimately, it didn't matter. I didn't feel a property feeling around it. If you were in a relationship or emotionally invested, feel very different. But if it was a sexual experience, I never knew before that moment that I wouldn't have a problem with that. But I did have a problem. I was like, no, nothing else feels very interesting.
Yeah.
We're good.
Like, nah, we're good.
We're good.
Yeah, I think there is a lot of pulling back the veil, right? Of just seeing things differently. And I love this connection of intuition. And I feel very much at the beginning of my journey in many ways.
And I've been using intuition to feel my next intimate partner, experience it to its fullest, to stay in tune with it. I've never had unconscious sex. I've never been really drunk or really out of my mind or not remembered it or not at the whole time making sure it feels expansive. And I don't know, I think my parents when I was younger told me and my sister, if anyone ever touches you in a way you don't want to, that's their problem. They're wrong. You push them away and tell any adult you can. So I was like told to protect my body. And I somehow felt like I knew it had what was going to be good for me. And I've never done anything sexually I didn't want to. Even if I'm halfway in it and it's going well, but all of a sudden it doesn't feel right to me, I'm like, I need to take a break and I need to feel into it. And I'll be like, I can't keep doing this. I'm sorry. And I'll get up and leave. Like, I don't know why, but I've always given myself permission to keep in that feeling. And then the second it's gone, to stop and find out why. I'm allowed to end it. I've told women, they're like, yeah, but you went over and you got, and I'm like, someone can invite you over for tea and you can be like, I don't want to drink the tea. You can take one sip and say, I don't want more. You can say, I want another cup. You can say, I want a whole pot. You're allowed to have as much tea. You're allowed to say, I don't want to be in your tea room when I'm leaving. You're allowed to do whatever feels right to you. And you're allowed to have that change moment to moment.
And this is radically different for most women, by the way.
Say more.
I just think that's not the norm. I think a lot of women do things, well, I'm here. I've said, yeah. I mean, that's a whole conversation around consent. It's a whole conversation around.
I've done the research.
Of course you have.
85% of women say that they frequently and regularly feel pain and do things they don't want to do in sex. And the 3 reasons cited is they don't want to have relationship problems. They don't want
keep the peace.
Yeah, they want to keep the peace. And they feel like it's their duty as a woman for his pleasure, not hers. And they're actually afraid of getting hurt or raped.
Yeah, makes sense.
Yeah. And I've always felt like I could handle things if they went south, and I would do what it takes to get out of it. I've just never been like, nothing in me in that moment could be like, oh, I can just keep doing this even though it hurts. In that micro moment, I'm like, anything to stop it. I will not go against myself. I don't know why I've had that in place so strongly. And I'll be like, you don't want to be the guy that pushes me. Like, I just said no, and you're being that guy. They're like, I'm not that guy. I'm like, you're being that guy. Do you want to be that guy? And they're like, oh, I'm sorry. Right. And I'm like, I need a minute. And if you do anything else, then you're that guy. I'm not that girl. You're that guy. And that's worked every single time for me. But I've had to call them out in it.
Yeah. I just think it's worth pointing out it's radically different than most women have operated through their life. Yeah.
I know.
Yeah.
I know. Because I've never told this to someone ever. And I've told many women, girls, no one's ever said, yeah, me too.
Yeah.
They've been like, I can do that? Really? But what if he, call him out? Leave. Grab your phone and say, I'm calling the police. Whatever it takes.
Yeah.
That's their responsibility.
Right.
Your responsibility is to be a full yes all the time. And the second it isn't, you just be like, I need a break. I need to tune in. I don't know why I feel this way, but I need a moment. This could be me or not. Or when you did this, it hurt. Or when it started going that direction, it doesn't work for me. Can we try this? And if they can't handle that, you're not to be in bed with them. Get out. I mean, people are like, then you would, there's no guys then. And I'm like, no, I've had hundreds of lovers. There's lots of guys.
Yeah.
But again, it's really normalized. Patriarchy has trained the biochemistry of our brains and our body's response to be aroused by pleasing men who were the sole ability for us to survive in the world.
Mm-hmm.
One man could make or break our economic and our safety, everything. So one man had to choose us, and we had to do everything to keep him choosing us,
Mm-hmm.
or we would be killed, cast aside, hurt at home. There was
Right.
no other choices
Yeah.
for 11,000 years.
It's in our DNA.
It's in our DNA
Mhm.
until we bring consciousness to it.
Mm-hmm.
Consciousness can override the programming.
Mm-hmm.
It can be my programming saying to eat cake because sugar used to be scarce when, I was in a hunter-gatherer society. So when I saw sugar, my body said, get it, it's good for you. But I know when it says get it, it's good for you, it's not. So I'm just going to have a little bit of dessert.
Mm-hmm.
And it's okay. We don't kill ourselves eating sugar. We can also not kill ourselves.
Says the person who was like, take the chocolate out of my apartment when you leave.
If you're premenstrual, everything I just said when it goes out the window.
Take the chocolate. I might go through the garbage. Get it out of here.
At a certain time of the month, you can become primal and you can eat things and have sex with things you shouldn't.
Yes.
These things vary.
It's true.
These things vary. But at least I had the consciousness to say, take it out of my hands.
It's true. You brought consciousness to your...
Consciousness is always the answer, goddess. Always the answer. Okay, do we have anything else to share about sex and intuition? I feel like we covered a lot.
We did cover a lot.
I would say go for the expansiveness. Know that you can set up agreements. Know that keeping them is really important, that you can back out of intimacy in the moment or the relationship if agreements can't be kept.
Mm-hmm.
That would be my biggest
And trusting,
advice.
I think as you said, like trust your body, but pay attention to what's circuitry and what's with consciousness.
Yep.
Where am I in my healing journey? Am I really being lit up by old patterns?
Mm-hmm.
Or am I listening for the yes at every moment?
Mm-hmm. And is my body's yes, if I really play it through of what I know of this person, am I also emotionally going to be nourished? Am I also situationally and intellectually, if those things are desires of other layers? So just paying attention to more than just the automatic arousal and putting consciousness to,
right?
If it's going to really be
and
the
putting
experience you
language
want.
even to like, what do I need? I mean, I learned this both at the sex party and also from you of like putting language to the container of like, what do I need after? Do I need you to text me? Do I want to be cuddled? Like there's a whole language around aftercare. I was like, what's that? That's cool. I want you to text me goodnight. Like, yeah. But I think it also begins a process of like, what do I actually want? What do I need?
That's the most valuable thing we can do with ourselves ever is ask, what is my inner truth? What would I do if I was being most nourishing to myself? Mm-hmm. Yeah. And it can change. It can be today, I really want someone to sleep over and cuddle. And they can be like, I don't want someone to sleep over. I need to write in the morning.
Mm-hmm.
Like, and being in tune with that real time and being with another who's in tune with that real time and then taking those two truths and seeing if they weave or giving space when they don't. That's healthy, sovereign intimacy.
Good stuff.
Good stuff.
Stay tuned for more adventures as Anya goes out seeking sovereign intimacy.
And makes her best friend come to sex parties with her.
Always.
Someone's got to hold your hand through this, goddess.
Yes. And I know you will.
I will. I always will. It's wildly entertaining. I don't know, there's an innocence to you and there's this experience to you. And, we're both like near 50 and it's just awesome it's awesome also to pass on what I've learned from so many decades of being mostly single and not in relationship. And
we're here for the ride, here for the journey.
Yeah. It's always like, call me in the morning. Can't wait to hear.
That's the everyday magic.
Mm-hmm. Are we complete with sharing our intersection of sex intuition for now?
I think so. I feel complete. Do you feel complete?
Yeah. I mean, that was a lot of outpouring. I will be so curious. I would love people to come and visit us. Where do they talk about this? I mean, where do we have these types of conversations?
Future, we'll have more. I don't know.
But is it still going to get our newsletter and to
do
we share more about this?
Yep.
Yeah.
I think that's a good moment.
Okay. Well, I know that we're going to have more that we think about after that we wish we would have shared on this episode. So we'll probably have some nuggets in our next newsletter and would love everyone to go to sophanyabeauty.com and just sign up so that we can keep the conversation going.
And don't forget to like, follow, and subscribe so you don't miss an episode.